I didn't watch the third Democratic debate, which is what we'll talk about on today's episode of Connecticut Yankee Sanity. If you didn't either, for which I wouldn't blame you, I'll quote some joint 538 Ipsos post-debate polling data to update you on who went up and who went down, so we won't be completely in the dark. But first, here are three reasons why I passed on the non-event. 1. The DNC's shamelessly denying Tulsi Gabbard the stage pissed me off. 2. Presidential wannabes firing zingers at each other provides about as much substance as a gaggle of comedians in a group stand-up routine. How can I justify the time out of my life? 3. I don't need a sedative to fall asleep at night. Now, please, imagine a drum roll in the background followed by a cymbal crash and the results are in. Pretty boy, Beto O'Rourke, who I understand did not enter the stage on a skateboard, apparently acquitted himself well. The share of poll respondents considering voting for him soared from, now get this, 15.6% to 16.1%. Wow! Takes your breath away, doesn't it? Fellow Texan Julian Castro was less lucky. He went after frontrunner Joe Biden but ended up shooting himself in the foot. It was a singularly embarrassing mishap for a young gun control Turk. He fell to the ground, ranked dead last. Kamala Harris was still pouting over the thrashing Tulsi Gabbard gave her last time out, so she was off her game too. Respondents considering voting for her declined from 27.7% before the debate to 25.5% afterwards. Cami can at least console herself that Mr. Biden also slipped a bit, except he's the solid front-runner, while she may have to move home and live in her father's basement before this is all over. Bernie Sanders was his usual lovable self as Karl Marx's ambassador to the New World, but his performance was just so-so. All in all, it was an anemic evening. But there was one standout, Elizabeth Warren. No doubt she was relaxed going in, knowing that grenade-throwing Tulsi Gabbard was well behind enemy lines being interviewed by Tucker Carlson on Fox News. On a scale of 0 to 4, Mrs. Warren copped a grade of 3.4, the best of the bunch. Mr. Biden, by comparison, managed only a four-way tie at 3.0 with Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and Bernie Sanders. Mrs. Warren's favorability, with respondents considering voting for her, also rose impressively, from 44.4% to 48%. True, Cory Booker and Peter Buttigieg aced her on the voter euphoria index, but they're in nowheresville, Oval Office-wise, so it's meaningless. Elizabeth won, and there you have it. Now, back to the real world. Although his overall approval number has slipped, and may slip further after this last debate, Mr. Biden remains well up over his competitors in most polls. He has a positive flair, though, for incoherence. He either confuses his audience or makes it wonder if it isn't time for him to hang up his cleats. What saves him is the undifferentiated radical leftism manifested by the rest of the field. He's the only one who appears not to want the United States to become a communist dictatorship. I believe he's sincere in that, whereas the rest of them would jump at the chance, as long as they could be the party bosses telling the rest of us what to do and not suffer any personal inconvenience or deprivation. Last October, conservative Canadian psychologist and academician Jordan Peterson was interviewed for British GQ magazine by the stereotypical liberal feminist Helen Lewis. At one point, he said to her as politely as he possibly could that if he knew her position on one or two issues, he'd know her position on all of them. But I wouldn't know you, he said. That sums up how I feel about the Democratic debates. Who are these guys parroting the far-left line? With the exception of Joe Biden, the liberal pack of presidential wannabes all advocate essentially the agenda laid out by 29-year-old Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That any believes it's even remotely viable, let alone good for the country, is a stretch. Mr. Biden may not be the sharpest tool in the Democratic shed, but he at least understands that far left means loser, which is why he remains the front runner. Mrs. Warren, on the other hand, started out life as a Republican, for heaven's sake, And now she believes that what we need is free everything, with the government stage managing our lives down to getting our kids dressed and off to school? Or that flooding the country with impoverished immigrants who don't speak English will be wonderful for us? Or that we should abolish the Electoral College so politicians like her can win the presidency? I don't know the woman, but what she says scares the bejesus out of me. Likewise, Kamala Harris, who thinks I should become a vegetarian to save the planet. As for Bernie Sanders and the rest, well, never mind Bernie Sanders and the rest. If one of them were in serious danger of occupying the Oval Office, we all might as well shove off for Venezuela now and be done with it. Thursday's debate reconfirmed that the Democratic Party remains in a heap of trouble. The frontrunner is an experienced, if unexciting, politician, clearly past his prime. He's at a stage in life where he ought to be retired and working on his memoirs. Instead, the DNC hornswoggled him into having a third try at becoming the president. Yes, I know, he's a consenting adult and no doubt was flattered, but really, folks, does anyone honestly believe he has a chance? What if the strain of the campaign breaks his health or kills him? Would anyone in the Democratic leadership feel a twinge of guilt over putting him up to it? As for the far left wing of the party, which the rest of the pack represents, it's proof that the squad rules. The Democratic leadership has convinced itself that the party has no future without pandering to it, when the opposite is true. Until they come to their senses, it's going to be slim pickings for the mainstream Democratic voters in 2020, unless they vote for Donald Trump, as they did for Ronald Reagan in 1984. Meanwhile, clear the tracks for this runaway train. Maybe out of the inevitable smoking wreckage will emerge a Democratic Party with competent leadership and presidential candidates we can actually vote for. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click like and subscribe to support the channel and pass the link along. We'll see you back here next time.